Welcome to Inside The Mavs right here on Kevin Gray Sports. Of course, my name is Kevin Gray. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Kevin Gray Sports. And, of course, on your home of the Cowboys and Texas Rangers 105 through the fan. We're continuing to get our Mavs Jazz preview ready for you as you get ready to watch the Dallas Mavericks take on the Utah Jazz. And I'm joined by a good friend of mine who covers the Dallas Mavericks, does all things digital content-wise. He's got a nice studio that he does his work in these days. And, of course, you can see him every pregame giving you all the facts and what you need to know before every Mavs game at the AAC. You can find him on Twitter at Bobby Karalla. It's my man, Bobby Karalla. What's going on, man? Good to see you.
Oh, not much, man. Trying to stay dry, trying to stay safe. How are you?
Doing well, man. It's one of my favorite times of the year. It's playoff time. And after a long, arduous season, it's finally good to get to the quote unquote real basketball, if you will, the games that mean something even more so than just the regular season. Are you do you kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel with it being after a long season? Now we're finally to the playoffs and ready for some more meaningful basketball, if you will, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like for so much of the season, really until like mid-March, you were kind of worried they might be in the play-in, and then it became pretty clear that they weren't going to be, and it was like, all right, let's just get to the end of the season healthy. Of course, they were about this close to doing that, and then catastrophe occurred. But yeah, I mean, to be to the part of the year where the games matter, where there's a lot on the line, the pressure's building, the drama is going to intensify and stuff. I mean, this is what it's all about.
Yeah, it's fun to get to this portion of the year and to see now these teams, the play-in tournament has started with the NBA and obviously getting toward the rest of the playoffs beginning this weekend. And for a team in the Mavericks that, at one point was 16-18 this season, and then after the first of the year won 36 of their last 48 games, I don't think people really understand like the kind of turnaround that this team did from January, or I should say December 31st to the end of the season, to win 36 of your last 48 games in the fashion, in the way that they did, and the changes team-wise with moving on, obviously, from Kristaps Porzingis, bringing in Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. Just a remarkable turnaround. Can you lend some perspective to just the kind of second half that this team had to get them to the point where they were able to even get to the 4th seed in the Western Conference this season?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, 36-12 over 48 games. You're winning at a 60-61 win pace over more than half the season, which is pretty insane. I mean, last season the Mavs started something like 9-13, and they ended up 5th in the West, and they had one of the best records in the NBA for like 50 games. This year, after the All-Star break, the Mavs had the best record in the NBA over their final 23 games of the season. And 36-12 over 48 games. I think the only team that was better is Phoenix. And so you're talking about an extended run of excellence. Not only on the offensive side, but also on the defensive side. It kind of fell off there toward the end of the season a little bit, but the offense certainly picked up as that was happening. And it's not just team success. Luka got off to that kind of sluggish start in October, November, but after coming back right after New Year's, led the league in three-pointers made for half a year, so that's pretty fun. Shot almost 40% from three, a gazillion 30-point games and triple-doubles and all that stuff, and the Dinwiddie trade was great. So the perspective on how it happened, I mean, it's still kind of a mystery to me. They were just grinding out a lot of close wins against really good teams. But, I mean, it was Dinwiddie, and it was the trade, and it was Luka, and it was the defense, and Brunson, and just like all of these guys. Finney-Smith popped off after signing the contract extension, which was cool too. I mean, everybody just picked up their level. Dwight Powell as well, was in there, and collectively and individually and philosophically and with luck and with all this stuff, it coalesced and just made this 48 games of really kind of just a rampage through the league. It was just awesome.
Yeah, several names that you mentioned there. One name I want to focus on in particular real quick. I give a lot of credit to Dwight Powell because this is a guy who has been much maligned for this team throughout the years. A lot of people figuring about how he fits with this team, if he should still be around with this team. But yet and still, he stayed the course, obviously dealt with the Achilles injury, came back from the Achilles injury. And to me, and I don't know about you, I think has been better since he's fully recovered from the injury. And you saw what happened for him during the second half of the year. he's been spectacular for this team and one of the real unsung heroes of the second half of the year, given what his role and what he is asked to do for this team. I thought Dwight Powell was just sensational during the second half of this season.
Yeah, he's been awesome. And like since Luka came back, so January 2nd is the big day. That's kind of when the season unofficially started. It's when Luka came back from COVID and injuries and all that stuff. Powell, up until the last game of the year, he just inexplicably missed 4 in a row, but he was shooting 85% from the free throw line. And if you're getting that from him, that's just like icing on the cake. But I think the big kind of step forward that he took offensively came kind of after the KP trade, or when KP was sidelined with injuries, mid to late January. From then on, Powell really became a much more central piece of this whole thing because, without KP on the floor, there's no high, pick and roll, pick and pop element between Luka and any other player. It's basically just Luka and Dwight. And, if you subtract KP, you're taking away the post-up element of the offense too. And so there's always going to be this wide open lane for Powell to roll to the rim and for Luka to drive. And so it's not like, I don't want to paint it as like KP was holding Dwight back, because obviously KP is just an unbelievable
That's an
player.
Amazing thought that KP was holding Dwight Powell back.
Yeah, that's the truth, Kevin. But but without that element, it opened up the lane for Luka and Dwight in particular to do their thing. And with no other bigs on the floor, bringing Maxey off the bench and, obviously no other power forwards, basically Dorian Finney-Smith, is that it? It was just the Luka Dwight dance over and over and over again. And, those guys have such a good understanding, such a good kind of like mutually beneficial relationship. Powell can really level guys with his screens. And for a guy like Luka, who's not super quick, he needs that extra time to be able to turn the corner. Like KP would always slip screens or kind of like just give guys a little chicken wing. Maxi Kleber is sort of the same. But whenever Luka can play with guys like Powell or Boban that can really deck someone, it just gives him the extra time he needs to get to where he needs to go. So I think that was a huge thing to unlock for the team, even though it came at the expense of KP, obviously, which is a pretty significant trade-off. But losing KP, they needed to find ways to create easy shots without him. And Dwight kind of carving that path for Luka was definitely kind of a godsend in that respect.
Never thought we would get to the point where we would say where Kristaps Porzingis was holding Dwight Powell back in the offense. But as we've seen,
I bring the juicy takes.
You got it. Yeah. But I mean, it makes sense because he's been so efficient with his rim running that it's basically an automatic bucket when he's getting the ball and Luka's getting him in spaces where he's able to finish with that kind of consistency. And now as we kind of spin this forward, looking at just the Mavericks themselves as a team, but now going into these playoffs, the elephant in the room is obviously 77 and his calf injury and what that means for not only his availability for this series, but also obviously for the short and long-term future of this team. I know it's difficult to try to surmise and figure out, okay, what the best plan of action could be going forward. But is this team in a position, Bobby, where they're going to have to really figure out, okay, we'll have to have one game plan for Luka, which is, Luka do Luka things. But obviously without him, what does a game plan look like to attack a Jazz team that has got an anchor in the middle with Gobert? Obviously some turmoil that this team has been dealing with, not being able to really hold leads in the fourth quarter as of late, but still a really talented team. How does this team go about attacking the Utah Jazz based on them not having Luka potentially for a couple of games in this series going forward?
So with Luka, you can always have two of either Luka, Brunson, or Dinwiddie on the floor. Even when Luka's out of the game, you still got the other two guys. But if Luka's out, kind of the next guy on the totem pole would be Trey Burke, who has had moments this season, but is obviously not as tall as Dinwiddie, not as strong as Brunson, not as good of a shooter as Luka. And so you're kind of like you're missing one of those three things or a combination thereof if Burke is in the game. And so, that's obviously a huge adjustment to make and the rotation fallout and everything like that. One thing that Dinwiddie, he's been amazing, obviously, but one thing that he's really kind of struggled with, surprisingly, is, pick and roll chemistry with Dwight. Feels like they haven't really quite figured out each other yet. Dinwiddie will sometimes turn it over, trying to slip him a pocket pass or a lob or whatever. Like their timing is just not quite there. And so if that element, without Luka, if you're running things through Dinwiddie, if that lob element, that ability to find the roll man is not really a part of the package on offense, then it feels like Utah can pretty safely just play drop coverage with Gobert which walls off the lane, allows him to just hang out at the rim and lurk and just sort of like see everything develop. And you're putting a lot of pressure on Dinwiddie and Brunson, and that in those cases to pull up from 15 feet and score, or like try and thread passes to shooters. But without that vertical element, it really stalls things out. The last couple games against Utah, Dallas was just Luka in particular was so dominant against drop that it forced Utah to just switch the bigs onto Luka. So whether it was Gobert or Whiteside, who they punished quite a bit in the third game whenever they played this season, or Eric Paschall, who I thought did a pretty good job against Luka in the fourth game. And so then they started targeting Mike Conley instead, and Luka just Luka really, really gave it to Conley in that game too. So, if you can't play drop and you can't switch, then what are you going to do defensively? But if you can play drop effectively, and there's a chance the Jazz might be able to do that without Luka, then, you're the one that's suddenly having to make adjustments. It's like, do we go away from Dwight and put Maxey out there for a long time? Is Maxey even going to be able to play? We have no idea.
Sure.
If you're missing that stretch five element, then Gobert just gets to hang out at the basket. And so it's a really kind of dangerous possibility. So hopefully Luka's not out long or at all. But in the event that he does miss time, I think you have to be able to find Powell a couple times early to make Gobert think about him, and then that's going to open things up for everybody else. So you have to find ways to create easy shots, and Powell is the easy shot guy. So try and find him early and force Utah to try something else other than their bread and butter.
Yeah, because it sounds like you'll have to find a way to get Gobert to respect the idea that Powell can still be able to be effective with Dinwiddie in pick and roll situations where they're still being able to get to the basket. Because if you can't create that kind of respect early on, like you said, it's going to be easy for Gobert to just camp out and just do what he does in the middle of the lane, and then forcing shooters to be able to make shots to somehow maybe draw somebody away from the basket at that point. And I think that's going to be one of the real elements of this series that I think is going to be underrated is, Kleber dealing with his injury, obviously, but his ability to stress the floor when he's right, his ability to pull a guy like Gobert away from the basket, if he's not able to come back healthy in the series himself, but then again, also be able to hit threes and pull Gobert away from the basket, that's just another element that I think will make things difficult offensively for this team, because we know how much Gobert likes to camp out. But if you can find a way to pull him away from the basket, maybe that can create some open lanes for guys to be able to do some things and be able to execute at the rim the way that they're capable, of doing. When you look at this team defensively, the Mavericks, number 4 in the NBA since December 31st in terms of defensive rating. How impressed have you been with the overall defensive turnaround? It's funny because remember what Jason Kidd said earlier this year, that this team wasn't built to play defense, but they sure acted like it during the second half of the year. What has impressed you most about what they've done in their turnaround defensively in the second half of the year?
I mean, honestly, it's that they've done it with the personnel that they have. Since KP's departure, you're playing Jalen, you're playing Luka, you're playing Dwight Powell all on the floor together at the same time for like 15, 20 minutes a game. And sure, you get Bullock and Finney-Smith out there alongside. Those guys are obviously positive defenders, but I don't think anyone's going to say that about any of the other three guys.
Sure.
And you're playing undersized, and so teams have targets to go out. They're going to target Luka. They're going to target Brunson. Dwight has trouble containing some of these big Goliaths like Jokic or Embiid or some of these guys. So the fact that they've been able to, kind of overcome any sort of weaknesses in this 5-man chain that your personnel might just create for you. I mean, that's a testament to the coaching staff, but also to the players too. I mean, Jalen is working way harder on defense, I think, than he has, and way smarter too. He's making a lot better decisions. Last season, it felt like he would just kind of, doze off for a second, or like go into a screen instead of dodging a screen. Like this year, it just feels like he's just a better, more engaged defender, and that's super important, because if you got a guard and a wing that you can go at over and over and over again, it's just really tough to plug all those holes. And Dwight, frankly, is not the kind of guy that can do that all by himself at the rim.
Sure.
So, the starting lineup has really figured it out. But I also think, too, they've been giving Josh Green a lot more minutes, and he's just been super duper ultra active. And that's been really nice to see. And, Maxi Kleber has been, shooting really poorly for a while now, but defensively, he still gives them a lot. And I thought Marquise Chris has given them some good minutes too, even though he's a little foul happy at times. But I mean, for the most part, I feel like they've done a really good job of kind of reshaping their identity, not only after the KP trade, but also after losing Tim Hardaway Jr. I mean, that's two major offensive players that you're losing. You have to lean more on defense. And so let's give more minutes to the defensive guys and just play through Luka, Brunson, and Dinwiddie like every time down on offense and hope that they can kind of collectively score like 100 points and push us over the top. I mean, that's what it's had to be, and they've been able to do it. I mean, Finney Smith is just a legend, and Reggie Bullock has been really, really good too. So, those guys get a lot of credit. But for the most part, I would say it's just, I mean, all 5 starters have to be engaged on defense for it to work. And, to Luka's credit, Brunson's credit, and especially Powell's credit, they have been.
Yeah, I think the over communication, the scrambling that they're able to do, the closeouts have been much better during the second half. You can tell that this team is trying to make sure that they're making up for any missteps or misconnections that they have on defense by making sure they're over communicating, scrambling on defense, finding a way to close out on shooters, to give themselves opportunities to close out possessions. And one of the things that has always concerned me about this team is their defensive rebounding, being able to close out possessions and be able to not give teams extra possessions. They're even doing that a little bit better during the second half of the year, which is important. I think one of the more underrated aspects of defense is the defensive rebounding aspect, because it doesn't do you any good to be able to guard a team for, 15, 20 seconds in the shot clock, but still not be able to close out in terms of getting a rebound and not giving up second chance, opportunity. So I think that's been another underrated aspect of their defense, is that they're not giving teams and allowing teams a lot of extra possessions so that they're not getting and having to capitalize, on possessions that they're giving up at that rate.
I mean, it has been a struggle at times for them to do that.
Yeah.
But when these guys are engaged, that's when, Josh Green is flying in there. Finney Smith is flying in there. Even like Luka has been working harder to get those rebounds. I mean, everybody's got to step up and do that. And the other thing too, I mean, going ahead into this series, Gobert is way bigger than anybody on the Mavs roster outside of Boban. And so defensive rebounding, I mean, if you slouch off for like 1 second, Gobert's going to make you pay. And so that's going to be a huge, huge, huge focal point for this series, because Utah, especially with Gobert on the floor, is an elite rebounding team. I mean, that's going to be a big, 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 big focal point of the series, especially if Powell's switching off him to guard smaller players. It's got to be a village every single trip down the floor to get a rebound over Gobert.
Yeah, they're going to have their hands full with a guy who's a 3-time defensive player of the year and a guy that can clean up the glass on both ends of the floor, given how big and how well he can play on both ends. It's interesting because it sounds like as we get down to this series is literally going to hinge on the availability of 77 and his chances of getting out there. It was funny. We were talking before we got on, Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, put out and said, hey, look, if these were regular season games, we wouldn't even be talking about Luka Doncic playing in a series like this in games possibly this weekend, and that the strain may be a little bit more severe than what, has been obviously diagnosed so far. Now, obviously, that's concerning when you hear that for a Mavericks fan who's looking at the series and how important that it is. But when you look at this team, do they have enough to get themselves in a position where maybe if Doncic, let's just say he misses the first couple of games in this series, do they have enough to be able to at least split these games at home to maybe give themselves a chance that maybe by game 3, Luka could possibly be back and then, game on from there? Do they have enough in your mind to be able to do and accomplish that?
I mean, I think so. I hope so, obviously, but I think so. I think the benefit of starting at home is if Luka's going to miss game 1 or game 2 or both or whatever, role players are typically going to play a little better at home. They're going to shoot a little better at home. And the Mavs are going to need Finney Smith and Bullock especially to hit a ton of threes in this series. And so, if those guys are shooting it, and if, they only got one Gobert, they only got one Royce O'Neal, which means someone's going to have to guard Brunson or Dinwiddie. O'Neal can only guard one of those guys. Gobert can only think about one. So if the other guy can pick it up, then, it's possible. And, defensively, I think there's not much drop off at all from Luka to Dinwiddie. I mean, Dinwiddie might even be a better defender than Luka. Obviously, they're losing a lot of rebounding, but just man to man, Dinwiddie might be a little better. And so, it's possible. I think they can definitely win a game against Utah on any given night without Luka. But to do it like 4 times in 7 games is obviously that's going to be quite a chore. So hopefully Luka's back soon. I would think I'm coming into the series. Before the injury, I was super confident that the Mavs would beat Utah.
Same. Same.
Not sweep, but like I was pretty confident. And so if Luka can come back quickly, then I don't think it matters honestly what happens in the first 2 games. If he's like back for game 3, let's say. But what you don't want to have happen is like, let's say you lose game 1, and then Luka's like maybe game 2, but then he doesn't play and you lose close. And you're like, all right, we really need him back for game 3. You bring him back for game 3, which is sort of a do or die, but like he's just not quite there yet. And not only are you risking injury, but also he's not quick enough, or and then they're going at him on defense and just no burst and no lift on a shot. I mean, that's what I don't want to have happen. You force him back and not only risk health, but also like you're just kind of torpedoing your own team. So I mean, I don't know. Obviously, it's really, really unfortunate, but I trust them to do the right thing. I think that's the most important thing. They're going to do right by Luka first, do right by that like organization, do right by the future. But the goal is that when he comes back, he's able to be Luka and not like a 50% version of Luka, because for as much as we want to meme on Utah for blowing all these leads and for they're ripping apart at the seams internally and all that stuff, like they will absolutely humiliate you if you're not rotating sharply on defense. And so you can't have someone dragging, and you've also got to be able to do some pretty amazing things on offense to score on Gobert too. So I mean, they need the best version of every player that's going to be on the floor, and so hopefully Luka is able to be that sooner than later for sure.
Yeah, no, you brought up an excellent point that I think some folks have gotten on me about, because it's not just about this series. And I've assigned a lot of importance to this series, given what it could mean for the future of other guys possibly wanting to come to Dallas, because now they've seen that they've proven that they can win a series with Luka and be able to move on into the playoffs, and what that means for the future. But I also look at it from the standpoint of my man's 23. He's got a decade and a half worth of games still left, hopefully, as far as his career is concerned, and what that means for him going forward. And if it means that you got to sit him and maybe miss this series, I don't know about you. It would be very tough to obviously not see him play in the series at all. But if it means something for the long-term future of protecting him and knowing that I could possibly make and ensure that his future is going to be okay, that may be a decision that I may have to consider, given what he's dealing with and the severity of how it could be, given the fact that he's dealing with this kind of an injury in this case.
You want Luka to be healthy. And so are you going to, you don't want to sacrifice potentially a whole heck of a lot just to try and win one game or something, or win one series. There's going to be more series. And so if it's a matter of, threatening something very severe to bring him back early to try and win this one, like it's just not worth the risk, I think, because there's just so much on the line. I mean, in 2003, Dirk had that injury against the Spurs. I don't think anyone remembers how serious that was. I don't think anyone knows how serious that was. But if you would have come back from that, potentially played, you're risking a lot. And I don't think anybody, in retrospect, is mad that they sat Dirk in Game 6 of that series. Like that was the right decision, And so hopefully it's the same thing now. But hopefully it's not a decision that they have to make.
Sure.
But if they do have to make that choice, I trust that they're going to make the right one.
It should be a fascinating series between two teams that didn't win a game on the road against each other. Both teams won both their home games against the other. Dallas winning their last 2 games against the Utah Jazz, and the final 2 games they played against each other. Utah winning the first 2 games of the season series back in Utah. So something's got to give. Somebody's got to win a game on the other person's floor to be able to win this series. Hopefully it will. I would not be surprised if this series went 6 or 7 games. I thought that even with, the possibility of Luka being out, but if he's there, I would not be shocked if this series went 6 or 7 games. Do you kind of get that sense as well, that this series could be at minimum 6 games, if not the full 7 games, the way that these teams have seemed to be pretty even with one another throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of felt like in the last 2 games, the Mavs sort of cracked the code. I think they found a lot of different ways to attack Utah and a lot of reliable ways to defend them. Now, Bogdanovich missed both of those 2 games in Dallas, so that's obvious. At least I think he might have only missed the last one. I'm not sure, but I know he missed at least one of them. Gobert obviously missed one of them. So, neither of these teams have really played each other at full strength yet this year, but it felt like Dallas found a lot of answers. But without Luka, obviously, it's all up in the air. So I wouldn't be surprised, if Luka played the whole thing, I would have leaned like Mavs in 5. But with Luka potentially out for who knows how long, could go the distance. I mean, it really could. The Mavs are gonna have to find a way to win at least one game without Luka, and then whenever he's back, boom, let's cruise. Hopefully they don't have to win any games without Luka, but obviously,
right.
We're talking contingencies here.
Sure.
But I mean, if he's going to be out for 2 games or 3 games, I mean, you got to find a way to win one. And if you can win one, then all the faith in the world that they'll be able to pull it out when he gets back. But we'll see. It's going to be a very weird game 1. If he's not out there at noon to take the tip off. I mean, it's going to be really weird. But that's why you made the Dinwiddie trade. That's why you've given Jalen Brunson more responsibilities. That's why you signed Reggie Bullock. I mean, you need guys that can hit shots. You need guys that have experience. You need guys that aren't afraid. And, hopefully these guys have had enough success over the last few months to where no matter who's in or who's out, they feel confident that they are the better team and that no one can beat them.
Yeah, if it wasn't weird enough, you mentioned it. They're going to be playing at noon on Saturday. Talking about getting the short end of the stick, having to play at noon on Saturday.
The worst time possible.
Oh, my gosh. It was funny because when Kidd said it initially during his press conference, he kind of said it kind of nonchalantly. But when I heard him say, I was like, wait a minute, noon on Saturday? First of all, I can't even remember a playoff game starting at noon on a Saturday in recent memory or really ever. But I guess it has to do with a lot, not just with the timing, but obviously the play-in games as well and trying to figure out schedules there. But I had never heard of a noon start time on a Saturday for an NBA playoff game that I could remember. Can you remember a start time of noon for an NBA playoff game at any point, especially on a Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, not for the Mavs, but usually that first game on Saturday, it does start at noon, but they always go for like East Coast game because it's 1 p.m. out there, so it's a little better, and you get the East Coast market, whatever. But I mean, I guess this season, it's unfortunate that the Clippers, so the LA market, and then the Nets, so the New York market, are in the play-in, so they can't really play the first games because they got to sort themselves out, and so. I think some of it is East Coast, West Coast bias, whatever. Some of it is bad luck, and some of it is thanks to our friends at the NHL. So, it's a big bummer. Obviously, it's a huge bummer that that's the situation because earliest time on the earliest day is exactly what the doctor did not order. But as the NBA is an entertainment business, as Luka is one of the biggest stars nationally and internationally. And as it's very clear that Dallas kind of got screwed a little bit with game 1, I hope that the basketball gods take that into consideration whenever they decide to schedule game 2 and game 3 on like Tuesday and Friday or something, to really sort of stretch this thing out to give Luka a chance to play.
Yeah, I saw that today, and then someone was like, yeah, game 3 could possibly not be until the following Friday, which that blows my mind that you'd have a Saturday, Tuesday, Friday for the first 3 games of a first round series. I remember the days where you used to play games 1 and 2 in back-to-back nights, and then games 3 and 4 would be, a couple of days later, but have a day apart between games 3 and 4. Then obviously the schedule go on from there. But we're talking about a Saturday, Tuesday, Friday for games 1 through 3 in a first round series. That's to me is kind of wild when you think about the schedule. And this is why the NBA
that to me would be justice.
Exactly. The basketball guys doing the Mavs a favor by stretching out the series as well. And I'm sure the TV ratings wouldn't hurt either if Luka Doncic came back.
Oh, and I mean, like honestly, that's important. It is important. You need your best stars to be able to play.
Yeah. So we will see as the Mavericks get ready to take on the Utah Jazz on Saturday at high noon at the American Airlines Center. Then a hockey game will break out 7 hours later at the AAC for the Dallas Stars after that. Bobby, tell the folks what you've got going this week, obviously getting ready for the playoffs, and what you guys over at DallasMavs.com are doing to get people ready for the playoffs this week.
Oh, all sorts of preview stuff. Kevin, you're going to be here on Thursday.
Yes.
We're going to be recording a roundtable hosted by Brian Damaris, including you, Tim Cato from The Athletic, and Chuck Cooperstein from the Mavs radio play-by-play. So that is going to be awesome. And then we're also doing a podcast tomorrow, myself and Mike Marshall. We're going to be recording something, and obviously on Mavs.com, got all sorts of written stuff, and on Twitch every day here in Studio 41, presented by Chime, my big fancy basement. We're streaming there Monday through Friday on twitch.tv/Dallas Mavericks. So every single day we got stuff going on. My head is spinning. I don't know like what day it is or anything. All I know is that Luka's calf, I mean, just please make it happen. You know, let's do this thing and let's try and get him out there on the floor.
Well, it's an exciting time for the Mavericks, a team that's overcome a lot this year to get themselves in this position. Hopefully get to overcome one more thing to get ultimately 77 back on the floor. Bobby, as always, appreciate the time, man. Appreciate you taking a few minutes out and getting us ready for the Mavericks taking on the Jazz. And I look forward to seeing you on Thursday.
Yeah, me too, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Appreciate it. That's been Inside the Mavs right here on Kevin Gray Sports with DallasMavs.com's Bobby Karalla. Again, you can find him on Twitter at Bobby Karalla. Does a terrific job covering all things for the Dallas Mavericks. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports, and be sure to subscribe to Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. This is Inside the Mavs. We'll talk to you later. Peace.